My husband cheated and here's my revenge. I exposed the affair and took his business. My name is Rebecca. I'm 32 years old and for the most part I've spent my life doing exactly what I thought I was supposed to. I married Mark when I was 26. He was the kind of guy who made everyone feel important, charming, successful, and always with a smile that made people want to be around him. He was the one everyone turned to in social settings, the one people looked up to in our tight-knit community of professionals. And for the first few years of our marriage, I felt like I was the luckiest woman in the world. Mark treated me well, or so I thought. He'd always say the right things and do the right things, but looking back now, I realize he was playing a role. The perfect husband. He works in finance and runs a few businesses, and when we first met, I thought his ambition was something I admired. He was driven, successful, and had the kind of life that most people would envy. And maybe at first, I did envy it. I didn't mind the long hours, the nights he'd come home late, or the weekends he'd disappear for work trips. I convinced myself it was all part of the package. I was a stay-at-home wife, handling the social side of things, making our home perfect, and managing our social events. I thought that was my role, the perfect wife to the perfect husband. But all of that changed. Slowly, quietly, like a thief in the night, something shifted. I had never really fit in with his family. His mother, Victoria, was an incredibly successful businesswoman. She was polished, always put together, and expected the same from everyone around her, especially me. She never outright rejected me, but her subtle critiques about everything from how I dressed to how I spent my days made me feel like I was constantly being judged. Then there was Adam, Mark's younger brother, the golden child. Adam had the kind of charisma that made people gravitate to him instantly. He was the one everyone in the family adored, the one who could do no wrong. If anyone ever questioned Mark's decisions, Adam was there to defend him. And with their perfect little nuclear family always looking on with approval, I felt more and more like I didn't belong. But none of this ever seemed to matter much. I'd managed to create a life where I could ignore the cracks, the uncomfortable glances, and the whispering between the lines. As long as Mark was happy, I told myself, everything would be fine. That is until the day everything came crashing down. It started just like any other day. I was at home, doing some light cleaning and planning a quiet evening. Mark had been out all morning, attending some work meeting or another, the usual excuse. I didn't think much of it. I had gotten used to his schedule. His work always came first, and I just had to find a way to fill the silence in between. Then, as I was tidying up the kitchen, I noticed Mark's phone sitting on the counter. His work bag was beside it. I don't know why, but for some reason, I reached over and picked it up. Maybe it was the nagging feeling I'd had for weeks now that something wasn't quite right, but I had been too afraid to admit it. I pressed the home button, unlocking the phone. He didn't use a password on it. Not that it mattered. I never needed to check his phone before. But that day, something made me open his messages. And there it was. A text from someone named Ava. It wasn't the kind of message I would expect to see from a colleague. It was flirty, intimate. The kind of message that made my stomach drop instantly. Can't wait for tomorrow. Let's make it even more fun this time. My heart stopped. Ava. She was one of the women who always showed up at the events Mark attended. I had seen her at countless gatherings. She was always laughing, always right next to him, acting like they were just close friends. But now, with the words staring back at me, the truth was undeniable. I opened the rest of the messages, my hands shaking as I scrolled through. There were dozens of texts between them, weeks of exchanges, all hidden in plain sight. Every flirtatious word, every promise. They were having an affair. I couldn't breathe. The weight of it hit me all at once. My whole body felt numb, like I was outside of myself, watching this all happen in slow motion. I knew deep down that something had been off for months. The late nights, the unexplained absences. But I had never wanted to admit it. I had convinced myself that he was just busy. That I was being paranoid. But this was proof. Cold, hard proof that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. I put the phone down slowly, my hands trembling. I could hear Mark coming through the door, his voice muffled in the hallway. I had no idea how I was going to confront him, no idea what to say. My whole world felt like it was crumbling in front of me. When he walked into the room, he smiled at me, that charming smile I had always trusted. But now I couldn't even look at him the same way. "Hey, babe, what's going on?" he asked, his voice casual as if nothing was wrong. I stood there for a moment, just looking at him, feeling every bit of anger, hurt, and confusion swirl inside me. He had no idea what I knew. No idea how everything had just changed. "Who is Ava?" I asked, my voice trembling but firm. He froze. For the briefest second, I saw his eyes widen in panic before he quickly masked it with a smile. "What do you mean?" I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I picked up the phone and handed it to him. The silence between us was deafening as he took it and saw the messages for himself. I watched as his face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The mask had slipped. And now there was no going back. The silence in the room was suffocating, and the phone in Mark's hand felt like it was burning through the air between us. His eyes darted from the screen back to my face, but the words stuck in his throat. For a moment, I almost wanted him to speak. To apologize. To tell me it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't. And I didn't need an apology. Not anymore. His fingers trembled as he put the phone down on the coffee table. The tension between us was thick, like the kind of storm you feel just before it starts to rain. But it wasn't rain that was coming. It was a torrent of lies, a flood of betrayal, and I had no idea how to hold onto anything without drowning. "I can explain," he finally said, his voice shaky, desperate. I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there looking at him. This man I had loved for so long was a stranger now. The perfect husband I'd seen in the eyes of the world was gone. And in his place was a man whose shame was so overwhelming it was practically suffocating him. "Explain," I asked, my voice bitter and cold. "Explain what, Mark? That you've been lying to me for months? That you've been sleeping with someone else behind my back? What is there to explain?" His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find the right words, but there were none. I could see the guilt in his eyes, and it made me sick. I wasn't sure if he was more ashamed of getting caught or ashamed of what he had done to me. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Wasn't supposed to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And now I'm supposed to believe that you didn't mean for it to go this far? Do you think I'm stupid?" He flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. The anger, the rage was burning through me now. How could I have been so blind? How could I have believed in him, believed in this life we built together when it was all a lie? He took a step toward me, his hands raised in surrender. "Rebecca, please, just let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. It's just Ava, she was there for me. I don't know how it happened, but it didn't mean anything. You've always been the one I love, the one I care about." It was the classic excuse. The affair wasn't about love, it was about comfort, about needing someone who would make him feel good about himself. Ava was just the convenient outlet for his dissatisfaction, the easy escape from the pressure of being the perfect husband. I wasn't enough, and I wasn't supposed to be enough. I stared at him for a long moment, and then I did something I didn't think I was capable of. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh. "Is that really what you think? That you can just say all the right things and I'll forgive you? That I'll let you walk out of this without any consequences?" I saw him hesitate, then look down at the floor. He knew this was bigger than him, bigger than anything he could fix with a few apologetic words. But he was still trying to manipulate me, to make me feel like I was the one with the problem. The one who was too emotional, too unforgiving. "Well," I said, my voice cold, almost detached, "you're wrong. I'm done, Mark." He looked up at me, panic in his eyes. "What do you mean done?" "I'm done with you," I said, each word like a bullet. "I don't care what happens next, I don't care how much you beg or apologize. You've broken me and I'm not going to pretend like everything is okay. Not anymore." I grabbed my purse, not even caring that I was shaking, and made my way toward the door. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice cracking, desperate. I didn't answer at first. I didn't even look back. I just opened the door and walked out. The cool air hit me like a slap in the face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I felt awake. The fog of betrayal was starting to lift, and as much as I hated the pain, I knew this was the beginning of something else. Something I could control. I wasn't going to let him ruin me. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. If Mark thought I was just going to roll over and accept his apologies, he had another thing coming. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I had my pride. And that was enough to start plotting my next move. So, I didn't know what I expected when I left. Maybe I thought the world would come crashing down, or maybe I hoped it would. But when I walked out of that apartment, I felt something else entirely. A strange, quiet calm. It was like I had stepped off a ledge and was falling. But instead of fear, I felt free. Free from the lies, free from the weight of trying to keep everything together for the sake of a marriage that had never been what I thought it was. The streets were quiet that night, the usual city hum muted by the cool air. I walked for hours, not knowing where I was going, just needing to keep moving. My mind was spinning, but it wasn't just the pain anymore. No, this was different. This was the beginning of something. A shift. I could feel it in my bones. I didn't go to a hotel or call a friend. I couldn't face anyone, not yet. I needed to be alone, in a way that didn't involve the house I shared with Mark or the life that had once felt so certain. I needed space to think, to breathe, without the pressure of his lies pressing on my chest. I ended up at Maddie's place around 3 a.m. Maddie was my best friend, the one person who knew me inside and out. I knew she'd be awake, waiting for me to call. She always was. I knocked on the door, and she opened it within seconds, her face a mix of surprise and concern. Without saying a word, she pulled me into a hug, and I let myself break, just for a second, just enough to let the tears fall. Hey, it's okay," Maddie said softly, her arms tight around me. "Come inside. Talk to me." I couldn't speak right away. The lump in my throat was too big, and the pain felt so fresh that it was hard to believe it wasn't all just a nightmare. But Maddie didn't push. She just guided me inside, gave me a warm cup of tea, and waited. We sat on her couch, The soft glow of the lamp, the only light in the room. For a while I couldn't get the words out, but finally they spilled. "Mark's been cheating on me," I whispered. The words were so foreign that it was hard to even say them aloud, but they hung in the air between us now. Real. Undeniable. Maddie's expression shifted immediately from concern to anger. I knew something was off. I could see it in the way he acted when I was around. He was distant, but I never thought it would be this. "Neither did I," I murmured, taking a shaky sip of my tea. I didn't even want to know, but it was there, right in front of me. And when I saw it, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't go back. Maddie reached out and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to go back, Rebecca. You know that, right? You deserve so much more than that." I looked at her, the tears threatening to spill again, but I swallowed them down. I had to stay strong now. For me. "I don't know what to do next," I admitted, the weight of my uncertainty pressing down on me. "I want to make him feel the pain I feel, but I don't even know where to start." Maddie's eyes darkened, and I could see the fire in her gaze. "You're not going to make him feel the pain you feel. You're going to make him feel the consequences of his actions. This is your turn, Rebecca. You've been the one sacrificing. Now it's time to take back control." I nodded slowly, the words sinking in. Maddie was right. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about me finding my strength again. It was about me taking back the pieces of myself I'd lost in the shadows of his lies. "I have an idea," I said, my voice firmer now. "But I need your help. I need someone who's not going to let me fall into old patterns." Maddie leaned in, her eyes intense. "You have me. What's the plan?" The next few days were a blur of activity. I didn't sleep much. I didn't feel like I could. I spent my time plotting, researching, and slowly starting to get my life back in order. Maddie helped me with every detail. We both knew this wouldn't be just about confronting Mark and Ava. No, I was going to make sure that everything he'd taken from me would come back to bite him. I started by securing some documents that I had been unaware of. Bank records, old business contracts, and emails from a mutual friend of ours who had helped Mark cover up a few shady dealings he'd been involved in. Things I had never suspected, things I had never thought to question. But now they were pieces of the puzzle, pieces that would eventually help me build a case. A case that would make him pay for everything. I also started reconnecting with my friends and contacts, the people I'd pushed away while I'd been so focused on making my marriage work. They'd been there for me before, and now I needed them more than ever. The real kicker, though, was when I started reaching out to a few of the women who had been around Mark and Ava, trying to uncover the full scope of the affair. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everything, the lies, the secrecy, the way he'd built this perfect image of himself while I was kept in the dark. Mark had no idea what was coming. And when I finally went to the private investigator Maddie recommended, that was when everything really started to fall into place. I had the evidence I needed, and it was time to put everything into motion. The days that followed felt like I was living in a game of chess. Every move, every conversation, every action had to be calculated carefully. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not this time. The first step was already done. I had all the evidence I needed. I had the bank statements, the business contracts, and even some incriminating emails that tied Mark and Ava together in ways I didn't even know were possible. But it wasn't just about exposing the affair. That wouldn't be enough. No, I needed to make Mark understand that he wasn't the only one who could play dirty. I had a plan, and this time it wasn't just about making him feel the pain he'd caused me. It was about making him lose everything, the perfect life he'd worked so hard to build. The first person I called was my lawyer. Maddie had recommended someone she'd worked with in the past, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney named Grace. Grace was everything I needed. She was smart, quick, and ruthless when it came to family law. I explained the situation, the affair, and how I wanted to move forward. She didn't ask for much. She just took the details, told me she'd handle the rest, and then gave me one piece of advice. Let him think he's getting away with it for now. We'll strike when it hurts the most. I could feel the weight of Grace's words settle in my chest. We'll strike when it hurts the most. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about confronting Mark and his affair. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and getting back everything I had lost in the shadow of his lies. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. And that's where Maddie came in. She had been a rock for me in the past few days, helping me with the logistics, providing emotional support, and just being the friend I needed to keep going. I needed to be smart, to act like nothing was wrong. And that meant continuing to play the role of the dutiful wife in public. But behind closed doors, I was already setting things into motion. I started distancing myself from Mark. At first, it was subtle, working later on my art, spending more time with friends, refusing to engage in the small talk about his work and his life. The more I withdrew, the more he seemed to sense that something wasn't right. It was almost comical watching him try to figure it out, his attempts to pull me back into his world only making me feel more suffocated. But I didn't let him in. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing what I was planning. Then came the hardest part, confronting the woman he'd been seeing. Ava. I knew it was risky. I didn't want to just send her a message or confront her through the phone. No, this needed to be personal. I needed her to see the consequences of her actions face to face. I'd arranged to meet her at a cafe near my apartment, a place she frequented often. I didn't tell her who I was, of course. Instead, I used a fake name, hoping she wouldn't recognize me at first. I didn't want her to know how much I knew about her relationship with Mark, at least, not yet. When I walked into the cafe, I saw her sitting by the window just like I'd imagined. She was dressed in an oversized sweater, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked calm, at ease, as if she didn't have a care in the world. I had to remind myself that this was the woman who had been playing a part in destroying my marriage. And now I was going to make her see what that cost her. I approached her slowly, my heart beating in my chest, and sat down across from her without saying a word. She looked up, startled for a moment, and then recognition flickered in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she recognized me right away or if she just assumed I was another one of Mark's business contacts. Can I help you? She asked, her voice cold and measured. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp and calculated, the smile of someone who knew more than they were letting on. I think you know exactly who I am, I said, leaning forward slightly. And I think you know exactly why I'm here. Her face faltered for a moment and then she quickly composed herself. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't waste any more time on pleasantries. I pulled out my phone and showed her a few pictures, nothing too damning yet, just a couple of candid shots I had of her with Mark, some taken from a distance at public events, others from private social media accounts I had gained access to. I know about you and Mark, I said softly. I know everything. She blinked rapidly, her hand trembling as she set her coffee cup down. Look, I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted it. Stop, I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to make sure you understand what you've done. What you've taken from me. Her face turned pale and she looked down at the table, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her napkin. I didn't mean for this to go so far. I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. You didn't mean for it to go far, but it did. And now you'll understand the consequences of your actions. I didn't say anything more. I stood up, leaving her sitting there, wide-eyed and silent. I wasn't done yet. But I had made my point. Ava was going to know what it felt like to have the rug pulled out from under her, just like I had. It was impossible to know exactly what to expect after the confrontation with Ava. Part of me had hoped she would break down, plead for forgiveness, or at least show some kind of remorse. But instead, she had done what I expected from someone like her. She cowered. She knew she had crossed a line, but she also knew that as long as Mark was willing to cover for her, she could keep playing her game. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not yet. The images of Ava's wide eyes and her helplessness when I confronted her kept replaying in my mind. I could feel my anger, my hurt, my desire for retribution burning inside me. This was my fight now, my fight for control, for closure, for my freedom. I wasn't going to let Mark and Ava think they could get away with this. I stayed at Maddie's, telling her what had happened, though I could see the look in her eyes, the pride she felt for me, the fiery determination she shared with me. We made plans that night. Small, calculated moves, ones that would hurt Mark and Ava in ways they couldn't predict. It was time to expose them. The next morning I got to work. I started by making some calls. Grace, the lawyer, was on speed dial. She had the documents I needed and it was time to move forward. She was thorough, meticulous, and ready to play dirty if that's what it took. You're going to hit him where it hurts the most, she said to me when I called her. Start with the assets. We leveraged the affair as part of the divorce proceedings. We're going to make sure Mark feels the cost of this betrayal legally and financially. It felt strange, talking about Mark like he was already someone I was leaving behind. But in that moment, it was clear to me the man I had once loved was gone. And the sooner I accepted that, the better. It was time to move on. The first step of my plan was to ensure I wasn't left with nothing. The second step, though, was going to be a little more personal. I had one more meeting to attend, one I knew would change everything. It wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about Ava. I knew I had to confront her again. But this time, I wasn't going to leave the conversation with a simple sense of vindication. No, this time I was going to make sure she understood the consequences of what she had done, and I wasn't going to let her slink away into the shadows. I called Ava, using a blocked number so she wouldn't know it was me. I knew she'd be cautious, but I also knew that she wasn't going to resist when I offered her a chance to meet. I told her I wanted to have a conversation about the consequences of her actions. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice when she agreed, but she showed up anyway. The coffee shop was quiet that afternoon. I chose a booth in the back, one with a perfect view of the entrance. I wanted her to see me first. I wanted her to know that I had the upper hand now. When she arrived, her eyes immediately scanned the room before landing on me. She was dressed in black, her usual aura of confidence barely concealing the nervous tension beneath her skin. But there was something different about her this time. She wasn't the carefree woman who had once flirted with Mark, the woman who seemed to think she could do whatever she wanted. This was a woman who was realizing that the game had changed and that she wasn't the one controlling the board anymore. I didn't stand up. I just waited for her to sit down across from me, her movement slow, almost reluctant. "Hello, Ava," I said quietly, leaning in. My voice was steady, but underneath it I could feel the power of the situation. "I assume you know why we're here." She said nothing at first, just stared at me with those calculating eyes. "I didn't expect this," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "No," I agreed, my lips curling into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You didn't. But you should have. Because now you're going to understand that everything you thought you had is slipping through your fingers. You had the chance to walk away, but you didn't. You chose to take him from me. Now I'm going to make you feel it." Ava's eyes narrowed and I could see the panic beginning to rise in her chest. She wasn't used to being cornered, to being the one on the defensive. I could feel the power shift in the room, the air thick with the tension I had spent days building. "I don't know what you think you're going to do," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But you can't take everything from me. Mark and I, we're together now. He's going to leave you." I laughed, a short, mocking laugh. "Is that what you think? That he's going to leave me? He might think that. But that's not how this is going to end." Her confusion only seemed to make her more desperate. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I slid a piece of paper across the table to her. She hesitated for just a second before picking it up. Her eyes skimmed over it and I watched her face change from confusion to dread. "You think you can just walk away from this without consequences, Ava?" "You're wrong," I said, my voice cold. "This is the beginning of the end for you. That document you're holding? It's a report from a private investigator I hired. It's full of information I'm going to make public. It's going to ruin your reputation, and the only reason it won't ruin Mark's is because he's already busy digging his own grave." She shook her head, her hands trembling. "You can't do this." "I already am," I said simply. "You and Mark? You're done. I'm taking what's mine, and I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are." The fear in her eyes was palpable now. She was on the brink of losing everything, and the realization that I was the one taking it all from her seemed to hit her like a punch to the gut. "I'm done here," I said, standing up. I wasn't going to waste another second on her. Before I left, I turned back to her. "One last thing," I said softly. "If you think Mark will be able to save you, you're wrong. He's going to burn with you." With that, I walked out, feeling the weight of the moment settle into place. Ava might have thought she had one, but I was the one who was about to come out on top. And Mark? He had no idea what was coming next. The day after my confrontation with Ava felt like I had just stepped into a new reality, one where the lines between revenge and justice blurred. I had watched Ava crumble under the pressure, her carefully crafted world beginning to fall apart piece by piece. But what I had done to her was nothing compared to what I had planned for Mark. I had spent days, weeks, maybe even months preparing for this moment. And now it was time to make sure he understood what his actions had cost us. This wasn't just about exposing him for the affair. It was about taking control back, about showing him that I wasn't the naive, compliant wife who would just sit idly by while he tore apart everything I believed in. He thought I was weak. He thought I was too forgiving. But he hadn't counted on the woman I was becoming, the woman who would stop at nothing to reclaim what was hers. I couldn't wait any longer. Mark had been calling me, texting me, trying to apologize in every way he knew how. But I wasn't interested in his apologies anymore. Not after everything. This wasn't about him begging for my forgiveness. This was about him seeing the consequences of his betrayal, of the selfishness that had defined our marriage. I had arranged everything meticulously, and I knew the moment had arrived. I had already taken legal action through Grace, my lawyer. The paperwork was in place and the evidence was solid, but the final blow had to come face to face. I called Mark. "Meet me at the apartment," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge he hadn't heard before. "It's time." His reply came immediately. "Sophie, please. We need to talk. Let's not do anything hasty." "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." I said, "Meet me," I interrupted, "or this conversation is over before it starts." There was a long pause before he finally agreed. I could feel the fear creeping into his voice, but it didn't matter anymore. The power was in my hands now. When I opened the door to him, he looked almost like a stranger. The man who had once been my partner, my confidant, was now nothing more than a shadow of his former self. His suit was crisp, his hair neatly combed, but I could see the weight of guilt pressing on him like an invisible chain. "Sophie, I know I've messed up. But we can fix this. We can talk through this," he said, his voice pleading. He took a step toward me, but I didn't move. I didn't want his proximity. "You don't get to fix this," I said flatly, my voice colder than it had ever been. "You broke it, Mark. You broke me. And now you're going to feel the weight of that." His face paled and I saw the panic flare in his eyes. He had no idea what I meant, but he knew this wasn't going to end well for him. He had been living in the comfort of his lies for so long that I'm sure he thought he could just waltz back in and smooth things over. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I sat down at the table and without saying another word, I slid the first envelope toward him. The one that contained the divorce papers, the evidence of the affair, the financial assets, everything he had worked so hard to build was about to be stripped away from him. Mark hesitated, his fingers brushing over the papers, but he didn't touch them immediately. "Rebecca, please, don't do this. We can work things out. I never wanted to hurt you." "You already have," I replied, my eyes locking onto his, unwavering. "And you've done it more times than you even realize. But now? Now it's my turn." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my words settle into the room. He could see it now, I was done being a victim. I wasn't going to let him continue to have power over me. Mark looked down at the papers, his face filled with disbelief. I knew he was trying to process the enormity of what I was doing. I had no intention of leaving him with any room for escape. No more pretending. No more lies. You're going to lose everything, Mark, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but every word hung in the air like a death sentence. You'll lose your reputation. You'll lose your business. You'll lose me. You'll lose everything. He reached for the papers, his hands shaking. I watched him closely, my heart racing. For so long, I had been the one on the receiving end of his manipulation. I had been the one who had been broken. But now it was his turn to feel the weight of his actions. The consequences were coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I can't believe this is happening, he murmured, staring at the paperwork, his face twisted in shock. I thought you would forgive me. I thought we could work through this. Forgive you? I repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. You think I owe you that? You think after everything you've done to me that I owe you anything? You don't get to rewrite this story, Mark. You don't get to control how it ends. I stood up, my voice rising with every word. You made your choice. And now I'm making mine. This is over. It's been over for a while now, but I needed the strength to say it. Mark was silent, his expression dark, but he didn't say a word in return. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings began almost immediately, with Grace guiding me every step of the way. We made sure everything was airtight, from the financial settlement to the assets. I wasn't going to let him walk away with anything. Mark had tried to manipulate me for so long, using his wealth and influence to control me, to make me feel like I couldn't survive without him. But now it was all mine. And I wasn't going to let him have a single thing that didn't belong to me. Ava, too, felt the sting of my actions. As the private investigator's report started circulating, Mark's reputation took a hit. She had thought she could get away with being the other woman, that no one would ever find out about the affair. But now the truth was out. Her professional life suffered. Her social media accounts were bombarded with messages from people who had seen the report and who knew the truth. The life she had built on lies was crumbling, just like Mark's. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weight that had once felt unbearable was lifted, and I was standing tall again, stronger than I'd ever been. And Mark? He was left to pick up the pieces of his life, trying to salvage what little he had left. But it wasn't just his reputation that was destroyed. It was his soul. And as for Ava? I knew the damage I had caused, but it wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I had taken control of my life. I had taken back my dignity, my power. And now nothing would ever be the same. I thought I had prepared myself for what came next, but I couldn't have predicted just how liberating it would feel to finally take control. After all the waiting, the quiet nights of planning, and the sleepless hours spent plotting my revenge, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of Mark's betrayal, the crushing blow of the affair, and the lies, all of it had been consuming me. But now, as the final chapter unfolded, I realized that the most powerful thing I had gained through this journey wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Mark had tried to keep me under his thumb for so long, manipulating my every move. He thought I was too naive to figure it out, too weak to stand up for myself. But in the end, it wasn't the affair or even the destruction of his reputation that broke him. It was his actions, his own decisions, that led to his downfall. I had played my part strategically, thoughtfully, and with precision. And now it was over. The final court hearing was set, and I knew this was it. The end of everything. As I walked into the courtroom, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. The usual nerves, the anxiety of facing him in a place like this had all faded. Instead, I felt strong and resolute, like I was finally going to close this chapter in the most definitive way possible. Mark was already seated at his lawyer's table, his back stiff and his eyes darting around the room. His usually confident posture was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. For the first time since all of this had started, I realized he was afraid. And that was a beautiful thing to witness. As the judge went over the details of the settlement, Mark kept his gaze low, refusing to meet my eyes. I almost wanted to laugh at the irony of it all. The man who had once looked at me like I was everything was now avoiding me like I was his biggest enemy. And in a way, I was. The settlement papers were clear. I was walking away with everything I was entitled to. The house. The assets. The investments. But the most important part of the settlement wasn't the money. It was the fact that Mark was legally required to pay for his affair's consequences. The financial damages, the exposure, everything. And Ava? She wasn't getting off easy either. As I stood to speak, I felt the weight of it all. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady but firm. This has been a long journey for me. And while I've fought for everything that was taken from me, I'm not here for revenge anymore. I'm here for my own peace. The judge nodded, and I could see Mark's eyes flicker with something I couldn't quite place. Was it guilt? Fear? Or just the remnants of the power he used to hold over me? I finished my statement with one final blow. Mark, I hope you learn from this. I hope you realize that no matter how much you manipulate or control, there will always come a time when the truth catches up with you. And when it does, there's nothing you can do to stop it. There was silence. And then, just before the gavel was struck, I saw something I'd never expected. Mark's eyes, filled with regret and disbelief. After the court proceedings, I left the building with a weight lifted from my shoulders. The truth had come out. Mark had lost everything: his reputation, his credibility, his relationships. And Ava, who had once thought she could ride his coattails to success, was now facing the very consequences she tried to avoid. The most ironic thing of all? Mark still tried to reach out, still sent messages begging for reconciliation, pleading for another chance. But each message went unanswered, just like the years of lies he had told. There was no going back now. I had made my decision, and there was no room for him in my future. I spent the next few weeks rediscovering who I was. I focused on myself, on my art, on my friends, on the things I had put aside for far too long. The woman who had been lost in the chaos of Mark's lies was finally finding her way back. And with Maddie's help, I started planning the next chapter of my life. I wasn't going to let my past define me anymore. The person I had become, strong, independent, and unapologetically me, was the woman I was proud to be. I took a trip to a little cabin in the mountains just to clear my mind. The isolation gave me the peace I needed. I spent the days painting and reflecting, finding solace in the silence that had once scared me. But now it felt like freedom. As the months passed, I felt the changes in me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The person I was before, the one who had allowed Mark to control and manipulate me, no longer existed. And I didn't miss her. Mark's life, on the other hand, was unraveling. He tried to make it look like he was fine, that everything was normal again, but the cracks were visible. People in his circle started distancing themselves, realizing just how deep the betrayal had gone. He had no one left to manipulate. His charm no longer worked. And I couldn't help but think this was the true price of his betrayal. His world was crumbling, just like mine had, except I was stronger for it. I looked at the future with a new sense of clarity. I knew now what I was capable of. And I was done living in the shadow of someone else's choices. I had learned a hard lesson. I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And no matter what happened next, I was going to make sure I was always in control of my own story. Now, I want to ask you, if you were in Rebecca's shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have walked away, taken control, and fought back against the betrayal? Or would you have tried to salvage what was left of the relationship? At what point do you draw the line between love and self-respect? Let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.